Thank you very much, Farooq, and thanks, Diksha, and thanks to everyone at Khaki for asking me to speak. Please. Okay, so basically what I'd like to do is to just take you through a whole bunch of aerial views of the city and point out a few things as we go along. So this picture is really what I refer to as one of the double bay pictures, where you see the back bay over here and you see the bay in the harbor of Bombay. It's an amazingly clear day, and a lot of South Bombay looks as if it's, from another place completely. You can see over here a little bit of Colaba. You can see over here what is Uran. But what's fascinating is that on a clear day like this, you can actually see so many ranges of hills on the mainland. And even over here, you can see Karnada. That's a map to show you the famous sort of 7 islands of Bombay. And what Bombay was originally referred to was just this little section here, which was Bombay Castle. And this was referred to as the Bombay Island. This was Colaba, this was Old Woman's Island, a derivative of Al Omani, and there were gaps between all of these. These were sort of rocky land masses with tidal creeks which came in and out and separated all these island masses. So they weren't very desirable. They weren't keen for people to inhabit them, and people lived much more in secure places on the mainland, etc. But this is essentially what Bombay was like in the early days. You can see over here, this is a view by an artist called Robert Cribb, who in the 1700s was able to make out a nice little aerial view of Bombay and show what it looked like at that time. According to his description, you can see all the hills on the mainland, which probably were visible constantly every single day at that time because it was so clear. You can see what is Colaba. You can see the inlet to the harbor. You can see habitation over here, which would be the area around the fort. And this would be Chowpatty and Back Bay, Malabar Hill, Haji Ali over there. And then going on to the Mahim Creek, separating Bandra from this little hillock on which he's put a church. And then more creeks over here until finally you come to the Baseen Creek and the Ulas River. So very well represented for somebody who did it in the 1700s and obviously hadn't been up into the air at all. A little later, you can see that all these land masses are fused and you have this one sort of island of Bombay in a French map and the island of Salsette, and separating them is the Bandra Creek, which is completely navigable, as I'll show you, that it actually was possible for a boat to come down from here, go through the creek from Mahim, come out at Sion, and then come into the Bombay harbor. Here you have the separation of the Salsette Island from Baseen and the mainland of Bombay. It's interesting that even in the 1700s, Trombay was known as Trombay, Elephantas over here, Karanja, Chaul, etc. Many of the names were pretty much set at that time. This is an image I took from a commercial flight some time back. And all of y'all should take pictures from your plane windows. And even though it looks terribly sort of gray and murky through the window, if you clean it up by putting it in black and white, you actually get quite nice pictures. So over here, again, we're over the harbor. This is the Thana Creek Bridge coming down into the harbor. This is Pir Pau and the jetty. You can see over here the Chembur refineries. Trombay is over here. And here is our landmass of Bombay with the Worli Sea link. But what's interesting is you can see the lakes over here. Powai, Tulsi, and Vihar. I'm not sure if that's the correct order. And they would feed into what was then at one time the Mithi River, which has been narrowed down to this little, very tiny little strip of water, which comes out over here. And this is the division, which in the old days separated the island of Bombay from the island of Salsette. Here, a little further, you can see the creek of Versova, and there over here, you can see Baseen Creek. So it's a nice image because you can see all the way out and you get some idea of the topography of the landmass of the city. Coming back to South Bombay, you can see what's really shocking is the absolute intensity of concretization of the city and the complete obliteration of practically any green spaces that there actually are. But again, looking back at that original map, this was the Bombay Island. This over here around Colaba Causeway was the gap which connected it to Al Omani or Old Woman's Island. And this would have been the Colaba Island that everybody knew about. Even now, if you go to the tip of Colaba and if you can get there through the naval areas, you can see this old Portuguese watchtower, which was there to prevent people from coming in. So here, let's start our journey through from the south, and we go through the southernmost tip of the island. And here you can see the US Club or the Services Club with the golf course and the embankment on which people walk. And you can see how rocky this area is, which is why it was always very dangerous for ships to approach close to the shore here, because there would be numerous shipwrecks. In one year in the 1850s, I think 3 shipwrecks occurred and bodies were washed up on the shores all the way to Back Bay and Chowpatty. Looking again over here at the southern parts of Bombay, you can see the Ashwini Naval Hospital. Over here behind that is the old Naval Hospital building. And you can see the Colaba cantonment area over here. Now, this is as if you're sitting on top of the golf course and looking back onto the expanding mass of the island city of Bombay. All this would be naval area. This would be the golf course. Somewhere down here, you should be able to see the steeple of Afghan church. Over here, you can see the oyster and dolphin buildings. The construction of the new Ashwini Hospital is actually in progress. But with this very narrow strip of land, which links Colaba with the other islands, you can see the expansion of the mass of the city over here, especially that of the Calf Parade, where the reclamation actually is. Here's an old view which shows you what Colaba was like originally. This is the sort of what was called the Middle Colaba Road, the Colaba Observatory, and the road which went past and connected to the city of Bombay. The landmarks here are the church, which is St. Thomas's Cathedral, and these are very easily identifiable in many photographs because they were Grant's buildings, and they're actually on Arthur Banda Road, very close to the Radio Club, and they are identifiable not just in etchings but also in photographs. Here you can see the hills in the mainland, and you can see the ships in the harbor, and probably one of the churches, but not the Afghan church, which you can see in this image over here. But again, you can see that Colaba very sparsely populated, hardly any development in it, and this main Middle Colaba Road, which took everybody down to the cantonment area. This is an aerial which I took, and over here you can see again the Afghan church. The trees are more prominent, and you can see over here what they call the Colaba Parsi Agyari, where you have the benches where people go out and sit at Navjots and weddings for their dinners. And over here you can see the naval equivalent of it. I've forgotten what the name of this is, but it's the sort of naval mess on which you can have your functions. And there are lots of mangroves which come up across on the seashore over here. Oyster and dolphin on the left. On the western side of Colaba, unfortunately, it's just one long ring of slums. And it's very sad that the city, which has such a huge and vast coastline, has very little place for the citizens to enjoy it, because much of the coastline has been completely encroached by slum colonies and squatters. You can see that it's almost universal that when buildings are being constructed, there'll be a slum colony close by where the workers and then later on the servants and the domestics all actually live. This is to show you how narrow the connection of Colaba actually is. Here again is the Afghan church, again more slums, and then you can see oyster over here, but again it's a clear day. So you can see the ships in the harbor, and you can see many ranges actually in the distance. Again, oyster, which is just a fortified rock. When the British reduced the amount of naval shipping that they had to protect the Bombay harbor when there wasn't that much of a threat, they created these fortified rocks as an alternative to that. Looking down here, you can see Sassoon docks. You can see the old, I think this is Mukesh Mills, which is derelict and used largely for film shoots these days. Then over here, you get to see Colaba Woods. I'm not sure what this building is, which is being constructed right over here. And most of this is just Colaba, and from Colaba on this side, from the harbor side, in Sassoon docks, you can see onto Back Bay, Malabar Hill, and this is the Calf Parade, and this is the Nariman Point reclamation. Here's an image of what Calf Parade was like originally. I show you that because this was a promenade on which people would walk. Roughly somewhere here would have been, or possibly this is the old Colaba railway station. I think this is all Khushu Bagh that you can see. The Taj Mahal Hotel, some blank spaces over here where nothing has come up, some of the mills over here. And these are the Cuff Parade houses, which were laid down in the 1920s and the 1930s in a nice Edwardian style. This bit is all fairly rocky, and there's something going out. But there's absolutely no construction, no occupation or anything over there. Now you can see, of course, that it's all become high-rise. This little ladder shows the Ambani family building their helipad on top. And these are the new buildings that have come up in Cuff Parade, in contrast to the nice old tiled roof homes and houses that are actually there on the ground level. This picture gives you a clear image of what the reclamation is actually like, and where along this sort of uniform border, now you have all this land which was reclaimed from the sea, and this high-rise construction actually, which has come up in the 1970s. I mean, people may think it's a good thing. Some people may think it's a bad thing. I'm on the side that thinks that there's no harm in reclamation, that we just don't do enough of it and cram too many people into too little space. So here I wanted to show you what that Cuff Parade was like. In the old image, we saw that there was absolutely nothing over there, but there's been the proliferation of a colony of fisherfolk or just general squatters who have been over there. These are the fishing boats. And you can see over here that this is just a single row of houses. And then they become 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 deep, even further deep where the rocks go out. When I passed by recently, all of these have now become ground plus one structures and are alongside the main Cuff Parade Road and the Badwar Park, which is where the old Colaba railway station was. What's interesting is that in a sense, these slums have served to fortify the city and prevent encroachers from coming. Because just here, where there's a gap for the fishing boats to perch themselves, is where Kasab and Co. on 26/11 actually invaded the city by landing on this and being able to breach the defenses because of this gap that was actually there. So, to a certain extent, it's a city which is fortified by slums. Here in the distance, you can see bits of the mainland, Elephanta, and the other islands in the harbor. Looking down from Nariman Point at the road which goes down to Mantralaya, what's fascinating is that this garden was actually supposed to be replicated on this side, but the temporary houses that were built here to house offices, I think in World War II, were never removed and became permanent. So this semicircular bit of the garden never actually got built. And then there was the Vidhan Sabha and all the other buildings which actually came up. Again, this is looking down on Colaba. You can see this is Colaba Causeway. This is Kushubagh over here, Meriwether Road over here, the Taj Mahal Hotel, the Gateway of India, which is again on a tongue of reclaimed land which comes out, and a bigger tongue of reclaimed land taken over by the Navy sometime in the 70s. And then along here, you can see all the docks which stretch all the way up north. It's not a very clear day. You get some idea of the CJ Hall. But what's interesting is that this is actually the causeway. This is the reclaimed part of land which connected the island city of Bombay at Apollo Gate right down to Colaba. To take you through that again, you can see that in this map, which is prepared in sometime in 1843, it still shows this little gap between Colaba and the islands. And it was navigated by means of a ferry. And this is the only image I've gotten. They said it was a peculiar pontoon type ferry, which was pulled by ropes from either side. And sometimes people were taken across on horseback or on palanquin. But many people died trying to cross during high tide because the sea was very forceful. And they'd come back from parties in Colaba a little bit inebriated and think they could manage the ford, and they would not. So this causeway was actually built. You can see it over here. This is a very early photograph which I managed to find of the causeway. And this structure here actually is the fort. You can actually see the fort buildings over here. Apollo Gate is somewhere over here. This is the Scottish St. Andrew's Church right next to the Kama Institute building. And the sea came right up over here onto the causeway, and here is where the cotton was actually stored. That's St. Thomas's Cathedral. That shows you that the causeway was actually extended further and strengthened, and some of the tented housing which was there on the esplanade. If you go into the Colaba police station and walk to the back, you'll see that there is this little marker which tells you that this is the site of the former crossing which separated the island of Bombay from Old Woman's Island, filled in 1838. Now, what happened was that the fort served to provide an element of safety to the citizens of Bombay against the Marathas mainly, whom they were scared of, because the Marathas were very powerful. The Mughals were overcome by the Marathas. But by about the 1820s, after the various Maratha wars, the English had become pretty much supreme in the Deccan area, and there was no real threat of any kind of invasion to the city of Bombay. So everyone got fed up of the fort walls, and a rampart removal committee was formed. And around the 1860s, the fort walls came down. And you can see that this is roughly where the fort extended. And the first thing that came down after the fort walls came down is that these plots were allocated for various structures to be built. And you can see from over here, Royal Institute of Science, Self-Instant College, the Secretariat, which is the City Civil Court, a Convocation Hall, the University Library, High Court, banks, etc., etc. And many of these were built in a Venetian style because the waterfront actually came right up to here, or maybe a little bit further. So in that sense, it was felt that Bombay was a waterfront town. You can see the laying down of the oval here, and on the left, you can see all the buildings which we now have on the western side of the oval are just about starting to be constructed. That's Churchgate Station, which was very much like a shed, and the BBNCI building, which is also designed by Stevens. Here you get some idea of what the sea was like. Just look at Malabar Hill, not a spot of construction anywhere on it. And here you have the tower of the University Library and the Rajabhai Tower under construction. None of the trees have been planted on the oval or have come up, and there's hardly anything over there. I think this may be even before the railway line had come in. To show you how close the sea actually came to the Churchgate, this is Churchgate Station, and this is the BBN, Bombay, Baroda and Central India Railway offices. And these days, when you see this building, you wonder why it just isn't as impressive as Victoria Terminus. And the reason is that because you don't have the perspective to view it. And if you stood back and viewed it from a distance, it would look wonderful and grand. But because of the fact that it's so hemmed in, you don't get a chance to actually view it from a distance. This is again a map of the fort. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but basically all these walls of the fort, which enclosed all the areas, were demolished completely. And there was a lot of outcry about it because people felt that a section of the fort walls should have been preserved for heritage purposes and for people to actually see what it was like, but almost nothing remains except that little bit near St. George's Hospital. There are very few photographs of the fort of Bombay also, but here you can see, and many of these cannons have been used as bollards and been pushed into the ground. You can see them, spot them in the Crawford Market area and other places, etc. They're old cannons which are just otherwise would have been discarded. Looking down again on the oval area, you can see the different styles of construction in Bombay. You have Gothic, you have some Indo-Saracenic, you have the Art Deco of the oval, and the modern hodgepodge in the distance. But what's also interesting is that as we reclaim westwards, we go further and further. In the earlier pictures, you saw that the sea was somewhere here. Now it's been pushed back to here. Now the coastal road, it'll go back even further. Another image of the same. It gives you some idea of what our university was actually supposed to be. It's a sort of a walled campus, which we never go into or actually look at. Very much designed to be like a campus in Oxford or Cambridge or one of the English colleges with a tower or a campanile and a convocation hall, etc. And unfortunately, it's all closed off now, so we don't get to see it from the inside. That's a view again of what the oval used to look like. And here's a sort of artist's rendition of the city of Bombay. Again, the famous Grants buildings are very obvious and you can see them clearly. The chimneys of the mills which are functioning in Colaba at that time, probably what was RC Church on a little hill over there in Colaba. And a lot of tenting on the esplanade and on the Maidans at that time, because to live inside the fort was extremely hot. And people complained that the thick, dark walls made it very unpleasant to live. So most people would hire tents and come out and spend time through the good months, not the monsoon months, obviously, living in these tented accommodation which was present on the esplanade. This is a photograph taken from the top of Rajabhai Tower where you can see exactly the same thing. And let's go back to that one. I want to show you that over here, you can actually see a little train in the distance with the smoke coming out of the engine. So this would have been the Western Railway line going down to Colaba. So sometime post 1860, 1865 or so. Again, you can see the railway lines over here. None of the buildings on the Oval have been laid out. Hardly any trees around the Oval. And that's where the bandstand is. Lots of tented accommodation. And here you have Watson's Hotel, looking really quite nice and difficult to imagine how splendid it must have looked at that time. Elphinstone College is under construction, the Sailors' Home, and again, our famous Grants Building, which are a landmark in that area. No Taj Mahal Hotel in this image. And interestingly, the Apollo Bandar actually cut quite deep into the city. We think of Apollo Bandar as just being what the gateway of India is, but it was actually bandar which came and had an inlet, because this part of the city was separated by water from Kolaba, and therefore there was a bandar over here. We're looking down now again at poor old Watson's Hotel, a victim of rent control, falling apart slowly. I don't know what will happen to it. And Elphinstone College and the Secretariat, which is now the City Civil Court, and the whole Kalagora area. Looking down again at the gateway of India, you can see the different cupolas which form the domes inside. And what's interesting is you see the Yacht Club, which was later acquired by the Atomic Energy Department. And what we think is the Yacht Club was originally the Yacht Club chambers and just the accommodation part. All the club activities took place here. And over here is the residence of the chief of the Western Naval Command, the boss of the Navy, who actually lives over here. And over here you can see Dockyard Road and bits of the naval dockyards over here. So the Navy has a big presence in this area particularly, and always had. And Wadia and Co., who came from Surat, used to build their ships, which were very famous in this area more than anything else. Taj Mahal is interesting because originally I believe the carriages used to come in from here and come around here and drop people off here, because that's been walled off now and there's a swimming pool in that area. But that was actually the internal main entrance of the Taj. This is interesting because you look back onto what was the fort. This whole area was the fort. And this area was at one time dense with palm trees and coconut trees. But again, because of the fact that the English felt very threatened by the possibility of invading armies, these were cleared. And they wanted to establish a clear line of sight, first 300 meters, 800 meters, 1,000 meters, and chopped off literally hundreds and thousands of trees to create these open spaces so people who were on the fort with their guns could defend the fort effectively. Fortunately, the fort never needed defending. But also what's interesting here is the line which delineated sort of white, British, posh Bombay from native Bombay. And this in many maps has been known as the native town, where the locals actually were given plots to settle down in. And the density of construction here is much, much higher. Again, we're looking down on the Maidans and the Esplanade. That's the Bombay Gym. This again would have been the border of the fort. BT over here, the BMC building. And it's interesting to see how close the proximity it is between Victoria Terminus and the railways and the docks, because people used to conclude their journeys from the west or the east or whatever in the docks, and then get onto a train, which then took them onwards to their destinations from here. So it was important that they be contiguous with each other. That's again a picture of the canopy and the statue of Queen Victoria, which was put up, I think, around 1875. The canopy you can see quite easily now. It's been bought by the Singhania family and placed in their house opposite Preechcandi Hospital. And the statue is somewhere near the Bhaudaji Lad Museum. The street furniture is also interesting. The lamps and the railing, etc., absolutely charming and lovely. And I think that is one of the wings of the cathedral school. This is an aerial view which shows you Churchgate Street past St. Thomas's Cathedral. And here you have the town hall and Horniman Circle. But the gardens have not grown that much. And there's not that much you can see of the Oval. This is an image which I took, and you can see Horniman Circle, and you can see how much more it's developed and extended further down. This is a picture of Churchgate Street and the actual Churchgate. This would be roughly where the Flora Fountain is right now. You can see the Bombay Times and Standard Office. I think one of them is a watchmaker. And but none of these buildings actually exist now, even if you look for them. Again, this is a view looking back on Horniman Circle. with the town hall, the Reserve Bank, and interesting to see how extensive the dockyards are right close to the city. But again, completely walled off, difficult for us to enter. So we don't actually see what made the city, which is the docks and the shipping and the safe harbor that it had. Flora Fountain, an early view with horse-drawn trams on tram rails and goragaris. A little bit later, the trees have grown and it looks more developed. A little bit later, you can see that taxis and Flora Fountain is lost between the trams and the tram terminus. And then now you can see it down there, but it's largely lost and has lost its sort of function as a central piazza or central node of the city because of the rampant construction which has taken place around it. That's a view of VT, which you can see, and that's a view of the BMC building, which has been recently restored. I believe they've restored a lovely big fountain, which is present between the two arms of the BMC over here. From higher up, you get an idea of how extensive the railway complex actually is. And it goes on to a lot of open space over here, which all belongs to the Central Railways. This over here is the General Post Office. And I believe that there is going to be some development or construction of office space, etc. This is one of the main roads which takes you north-south. And it basically was the road that people took when they left the fort to go out to the country estates in Parel, such as where the Hafkin Institute is, which was the governor's residence from his office in the fort. Again, taken to show you how contiguous the docks are right to VT, just literally behind you. But all the shipping and the containerized shipping which is present there, you don't see that often. This is St. George's Hospital, which was built as the European General Hospital and was exclusively for Europeans right up to, I think, the 1950s. This is the government dental hospital, and down here somewhere is the General Post Office. Again, a higher view and an earlier view, but again, massive amounts of shipping and the railway complex which actually come in from over here. And this is the demarcation of what was the fort, and the open space was the esplanade. Now, if we move over to the western side of the city and run along Marine Drive, you get some idea of what we have over here, which is all the Art Deco buildings on Marine Drive and the Brabant Stadium, which is present over here. It's interesting that the fort area doesn't have too many high rises. Apparently, it has some kind of heritage designation. So there aren't supposed to be high rises, and only the Reserve Bank and the Stock Exchange building and the telecom tower are actually there. Going further down, you see Marine Drive. You have the Parsi Gymkhana, Islam Gymkhana, Hindu Gymkhana, and all of them, which were laid down later. Along here are all the burial grounds. What is Espatal Udyan here was once the Christian burial ground before it moved to Sivri, and the Hindu Sonapur, Muslim burial grounds, etc. But look at the density of construction in what is C Ward, or what was Girgam, Kalba Devi, etc. It's completely overgrown. Nothing really, no empty space at all. And in the distance, you can see Chembur and the Chembur refineries. Again, this is a picture which shows you Saifi Hospital and shows you the effects of redevelopment. Because each one of these little structures now, which is rent controlled, is undergoing redevelopment under redevelopment rules, which is supposed to benefit everyone. And you have these high-rise towers, which are mushrooming out in every direction. This is an artist's view of Malabar Hill. And this would be somewhere on Malabar Hill looking down onto Chopati. This is the back bay. And here you can see that's the fort and the constructed area over there, and St. Thomas's Cathedral, and one little house on the hill somewhere in Kambala Hill. But it is very sort of imaginative, and it has an artist's rendition. But not even 100 years ago, you can see what it actually did look like. And it's amazing to see that most of Babulnath is just a huge, big coconut grove with very few houses over here. This is probably something like what Siri Road is. Chopati and the road going up over there to Valkeshwar. You can see some of the structures which have been built in the tip on the fort, and some little tower of the mills. So it's amazing how rapidly this part of Bombay has been developed. I read somewhere that right up to 1780, the whole of Malabar Hill was available for rent for something like 120 rupees. And the posh Farsi families who built big mansions on Nepean Road used it as their weekend residences and felt unsafe over there. Things have certainly changed. Here you can see Chowpatty Beach as you're looking head on to it on a nice empty day, probably a hot afternoon when there's nobody there. And then beyond them, you can see the mass of construction and high-rise buildings which have been coming up. And this, of course, is on that 1 or 2 days in the year where Chowpatty Beach gets taken over for Ganesh Chaturthi. Let me get that back. And you can see some of the idols which are being taken into the water for immersion here, here, and here. And this, I think, was the mini Ganesh festival. It wasn't actually the real Ganesh festival. So again, same day, but you get to see how the road arcs in one direction and the railway arcs in the other direction. Again, up on Malabar Hill, one of the few really green places in the city. And it's amazing because each of these places is a microclimate. When I sometimes get on the scooter and drive around just to explore the city, the moment you drive past hanging gardens, you can perceive the drop in temperature and it suddenly becomes cooler because of the greenery over here. All of this is part of the Parsi Tower of Silence complex. So it's sort of hidden off. Here's hanging gardens. And somewhere here is the Babulnath temple. And this is the main Hughes Road, which goes across on this way. In the distance, you can see Haji Ali, no sea link as yet. And if you come to the tip of Malabar Hill, you see the Raj Bhavan complex, which is really charming. It's like a big forest over there with lovely old tiled roof houses. Looks a little bit like Bermuda. Unfortunately, many of these have been knocked down. I think this one has been knocked down. This one has also undergone renovation. I think this one, which is the Darbar Hall, is the same. And there have been a couple of other additions over here. This little bit is the private beach of the governor over there. Again, you can see bits of the Raj Bhavan complex and Back Bay. Looks very pretty. But the one thing I sometimes go there to see patients. And the thing that strikes me the most about the Raj Bhavan complex is not just the greenery and the beauty and the space, but the silence. There's absolutely nothing you hear except the noise of your footsteps when you get out of the car, because there's nothing around you and it's very, very quiet and lovely. Just next to that is the Banganga complex, which you can see, which is probably one of the oldest built structures in the city from the time of the Siliharas and very revered in Hindu mythology. Unfortunately, again over here along the waterfront, we have a huge slum complex, which makes it a little unpleasant. Looking down over here, what's interesting is that most of Bombay in the 30s and 40s was like this. Big bungalows, tiled roofs, lovely big gardens with palm trees, etc. But now it's all become like this. And the reason that these have remained is because they don't belong to private individuals. This is the Chief Justice's house. This is probably another judge's house or a minister's house, etc. And because of the fact that these have remained with the government, these have not been exploited and built down and sold to developers and made into high-rise towers. So now one of these, just 2 or 3 plots down the road, sold for 1,000 crores. So I don't know whether the government will hang on to them or they'll want to commercially exploit them. If we are running along the western side of Nepean Road, you can see the Pettit Hall complex. And it's fascinating that this whole complex belonged to Sir Dinshaw Pettit's family with a big baronial mansion over here, which got knocked down. They built their own little house here, not so little, but a house. And in place of that one house where this one family lived, you now have 1, 2, and 3 of these massive towers, which are over here. This used to belong to Vijay Mallya, but I don't know who it belongs to now. And unfortunately, even someone as wealthy or as powerful as he was could not stop development of shanty towns from coming up over here. That building is Brighton over here. Looking back onto Malabar Hill, you can see Antilla, which is almost finished in its construction. Looking down onto Nana Chowk, you can see the various little trees and things at the back. And Grant Road, which is one of the big east-west connectors. Grant Road again over here, which is a road which was laid down for east-west connection. And this lovely little mini forest over here is the property of the Edenwala family, which they've preserved, which is on Tardeo right next to Bhatia Hospital. You can see that the Grant Road station complex is quite big because that's where the Western Railway originally terminated before it was extended from Grant Road to go all the way to Colaba. Again, another node of the city which connects the east and the west. This one goes from here to Bombay Central, which you can see here, on to Bhaikara and Nagpara. This one goes across to Lamington Road and to CP Tank. This one to Haji Ali, and this one to that's Tardeo, connecting up with Nana Chowk. I've taken a picture at night also to show you that really some of the nicest parts of the city are at night when it's quiet and you don't see the haze and the pollution, and you get to see the lights, and hopefully there's less noise. Okay, so this one is the Willingdon Club with the Willingdon Club golf course. One little nice bit of greenery. This is the, that's the Nair Hospital sports ground and the Nair Hospital campus. Here you can see Mahalakshmi Racecourse, but the reason I put it from this view is that you can see the gap through which the sea used to come before the Hornby Vellard was actually built. I think I'm running late, so I'll speed up a bit. And this is what the breach looked like. The water used to come pouring in furiously, Kambala Hill over here, and this was dammed up sometime in the 1780s. And here's a very, very early picture where you can see of Haji Ali and what is Hornby Vellard going up to Burli over there. This would be roughly where Eden Hall, Samudra Mahal are actually nothing built over there at that time. And you can't even clearly see Haji Ali over there. And this is where the Haji Ali circle is. This would be roughly where I think Hirapanna would be. Fascinating image. Again, this is Haji Ali looking at it from the other side, looking onto the main structures. Again, another view of Haji Ali, and the sea used to come in from here and inundate 40,000 acres of land, which is why this embankment was actually built to stop that from happening. But that's all very low-lying land, so it does tend to get flooded. Again, another view of Haji Ali with the Nehru Science Center. But behind the Nehru Science Center, you can see over here, this is the main sewage line of the city, which brings all the sewage from the island city through here, right up to Love Grove, and it's pumped over through the Love Grove pumping station, which is why whenever we pass over the Love Grove pumping station sewage area, we get that distinct smell of sewage, which is there on the other side of the Nehru Science Center. This is before the NSCI was built, and you had that little velodrome, which was there, Nehru Science Center. This is where all the horses, which are part of the Mahalakshmi Racecourse, are actually stabled. And you can see the main Hornby Vellard Haji Ali Road, Shiv Sagar Estate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buildings, all uniform and nice. Unfortunately, now they've changed, and that old uniform architecture has been lost, and there have been new things which have been built there. That's the NSAI dome, which is under construction, and the racecourse. Here, you can see the stables much more clearly. Here's a satellite view, which looks down on the racecourse and can show you the different railway lines and the density of the city. This one goes down to Worli, and Worli village is here. Arthur Road Jail. For those of you who haven't had the privilege of being inside, you can see it from the outside over here. And this is the circular bit, which is supposed to be very high security. And these are the various buildings which are jail. On the other side is the Kasturba Infectious Diseases Hospital, which was founded in the 1890s as one of the plague hospitals. That's Mahalakshmi Bridge, which is there over there. And coming down here, you have Sat Rasta. Ahead of the Arthur Road prison is Chinchpokli, and over here you have this large Chinchpokli Jewish cemetery alongside Chinchpokli station with the graves of the Sassoon family that were responsible for building so much of Bombay in the 1800s. And that, I think, is the grave over here of Flora Sassoon. Just some lovely blue mosaic work decoration inside. We are now along Worli Sea Face because this part of the tour comes to an end. And you're coming down to what is the start of the Sea Link. Much of Worli Sea Face again is now becoming high-rise, and many of these buildings have been knocked down and they've become big towers. This is again Worli Sea Face, looking down towards it. And here you can see the Worli fishing village. In a sense, the people and the coolies who live in these fishing villages have more right to Bombay than any of us because they're the original inhabitants of the city. When the Portuguese landed here, there were just a series of fishing villages, and these are the people who they actually enslaved. And for more than 200 years, they were forced to work as laborers, palanquin bearers, until finally the East India Company freed them of that responsibility. And so now they have the little Koliwaras over here. This is the one in Worli. And over here, you can see a little bit of the Worli fort. It's a fun walk to go through Worli fishing village and out to the fort, because you get a nice and interesting view of the Mahim Bay, and you can get a nice view of the sea link as well. Now, okay, so now we do part 2. Okay, so here now we'll do a different part of the city. You can see over here the Muhammad Ali Road flyover snaking all the way through, right from Crawford Market down through Mandvi. Over here is the original JJ Hospital building from about 1845, which is actually not JJ Hospital, the Grant Medical College building. And that is the JJ Hospital building. And I think there's some 43 acres of campus of JJ Hospital over here, which is like a little township. And over here, when I took this image, it was all uniform size construction with tiled roofs. Of course, this picture, which was taken about 25 years ago, is now completely outdated. That's a night view, and you can see the lights of the traffic coming down from the Muhammad Ali Road flyover. Again, you can see the tiled roofs of big chunks of Muhammad Ali Road and the Sayyidna's Mausoleum. There's some fascinating things. This whole area's got lots of history in it, as all of you at Khaki must be knowing, including this Shia mosque with the tiles, which they say have come from Iran and Isfahan for the inlay work, which is very charming. It's also a very multicultural area. You can see over here, there's the big Christ Church or the Protestant church. You can see the Magen David Jewish synagogue over here opposite Richardson and Prudas on the main Baikala Road. Over here, you can see St. Anne's Church, which is part of St. Mary's School as you go over Nesbitt Bridge over here, and the whole development of Mazgaon over there, and the Baikala Station shunting yards, which are actually over here. I think this whole complex is Richardson and Cruddas. On the other side is JJ Hospital, Hume High School, and the road which goes on to Baikala. Again, more of Baikala and Mazgaon in that distance. Dockyards and shipbreaking yards over here, Gloria Church, Rustam Bagh, Jar Bagh, and the Parsi statue is somewhere down. This is a view of Mazgaon Gardens or Mazgaon Hill, which is an extremely prominent part of the city right through the 1700s and 1800s. And Mazgaon was the most preferred destination to live because it was on a hill, and it was the eastern side of the city, which was residential. Malabar Hill had no development at all, and people didn't actually live there. And you can see that this is somebody's mansion over here, looking back onto the harbor and looking back onto the fort over here and the ships in the harbor over here. So unfortunately, a lot of this has been lopped off because it's been demolished and taken away for excavation and land filling. This is supposed to be Jamshedji Jijiboy on the terrace of his mansion, Belvedere. And the reason I took this picture, which is actually taken quite recently from the top of Bombay Hospital, is to just show you that on a clear day, you can just about see everything. You can see the little Karnala funnel over there. And this bit, unfortunately, it's not very clear, but that's Mathiran. And then before that is Prabal. So you can see that. And then you can see Peb and everything. So for a long time, you read descriptions of the British being very nervous because all of this area was what they referred to as Maratha country, and they had not any control over it. There's some description of the guns being heard at the taking of Karnala during the time of the battles of the Duke of Wellington in the Maratha War, and the guns were heard in Bombay as well. You can see the S Bridge, that's Victoria Gardens or Rani Bagh, and the zoo. Anything else of interest here? Yeah, this used to be the old Elphinstone College, but now it's the Central Railway Hospital, and that's Rustam Bagh over there. This bit is where a lot of ships are broken up. It's an interesting part of the city. We can actually see these small ships which are crashed onto the shore and then rapidly turned into scrap. And there's small little shops over here where little bits from the ships, where their deck chairs or little brass bits are sold. Shivaji Park, which we can see, and then the sea link in the distance. Again, Shivaji Park with the statue of Shivaji and the Mahatma Gandhi pool. This is interesting because this is Prabha Devi, and this road over here would be Cadell Road. And this is what they call Indu Mills number 2, India United Mills number 2. But this was originally the one of the Sassoon mills. And they say that Victor Sassoon had his house and lived somewhere over here, or right on the beach. And he also had a private race course where he'd time his horses and stable them within this complex. I think this is now slated to become a memorial to Baba Sahib Ambedkar, but at one time it was actually supposed to become a conference and convention center, which would have been nice because it would have had beachfront and it would have been situated between South Bombay and the suburbs. Here you can see Dadar TT, and you can see Dadar Parsi colony here, Hindu colony over here, and you can see a lot of medical land, Tata Memorial, KEM, Wadia Hospital, all of that here. And there are the salt pans and Chembur and the Chembur refineries. Now, of course, you see some of this when you go on the Eastern Freeway. That's Matunga or King Circle, and the road going and in and out of Bombay is actually quite straight. This is an interesting aerial view because let's look at the structures. Here you can see Dadar Circle, that's Tilak Bridge which goes over. And this is the main road which takes you out of the city. Here's that Matunga Circle that we saw, and that's where the city ends. After that, there's nothing. There's no development at Sion. That's Sion Fort over here. And then the city just goes on from there. What's also interesting is you can see what the size of the Mithi River was in the old days in this picture. And here you can see the lakes, Pawai, Tulsi and Bihar in that distance, which feed into the Mithi River. But all of this has now been encroached and filled in and become part of Bandra Kurla complex. So there's only just a tiny rivulet for the river and the overflow from these lakes to outflow, and which is why there's so much flooding in this area. This road out of Dadar also shows you the development of Parsi colony and Hindu colony, which were put up by the City Improvement Trust. It's interesting that Matunga has some old history, and it was part of a cantonment part of Bombay in the 1700s. And there used to be an artillery theater over there as well. Again, the same view to show you the lakes and how narrow the Mithi River has actually become. I've shown you this picture before because of the encroachment and development. This is again artist's impression of the church and river at Mahim. I don't think it ever looked like this, but that's what we're supposed to believe. This is the fort at Mahim, which I think is probably one of the oldest built structures, because this fort precedes the British, precedes the Portuguese, and is associated with King Bim, who ruled from Mahikawati in those areas, in those days. So this might be one of the oldest structures, but you can't even enter it because it's become some huge shanty town, even though there's a gate over here with some inscriptions on it. And this is the Lakra Bazaar in Mahim and St. Michael's Church over here. This is an interesting little plan of Mahim surveyed by Lieutenant Edward Harvey, which tells you what route you want to take if you want to go past Wandra Point and take the river with the different soundings, go past Mahim Fort, Riva Fort, Sion Fort, and come out on the other side as a shortcut to enter the harbor, indicating that this whole thing, which he pointed out was here, was actually navigable for boats. Now, of course, it's gone. That's the only little gap. This is the Mahim Causeway, and it goes across over here. This is the connector to the sea link, and these are the mangrove swamps, which are some Mahim bird park or something, and this is all part of BKC. That's Matunga Circle over there. We can spend an hour looking at each image. I'm sorry, but we'll have to go through it. I like this image because basically, yes, you can see this is the island city of Bombay and Chembur and blah, blah, blah. But this little bridge is what defines the gap between the island city and Salsette, the Mahim Causeway here. And this is where it all sort of was separated And it's historical also, because this area for a long time didn't belong to the British, it belonged to the Portuguese, then it was Maratha, and then after the Maratha Wars, it all got amalgamated and became part of British Bombay. But essentially, this is the demarcation of what is called the island city in Salsette. Here again, you can see an image of the sea link connecting from Worli all the way to Bandra. And that's from the other side. That's the old Sea Rock Hotel. I don't know how many of you remember it. And that was there before the Sea Link actually existed. And you can see what is now the Taj Land's End coming up. And then the Sea Rock has gone and Taj Land's End has come up and the Sea Link has come up. And within here, there's some nice historical bits here. You can see this used to be an old Portuguese watering hole which ships would come and stop to pick up fresh water, called the Portuguese Aguada, with some inscriptions over there. And some sort of fort-like structures over here. Nothing much, but lost in the whole melee of modernity that there is. This is Mount Mary in Bandra, on Little Bandra Hill, which looks a little smaller than it should be. And here you have Shah Rukh Khan's house, your Khaki Manzil, which has been beautifully restored. And unfortunately, along here also you have a whole bunch of shanty towns. And I think one of these is being redeveloped or sold, or some Parsi orphanage or ladies' place or something or the other. There's some fabulous descriptions of what Bandra was like in the 1900s and 1920s in Salim Ali's book. He lived here, he said there was no electricity, they had to walk all the way to the train station for everything, etc. And here again, you can see Shah Rukh Khan's house, Villa Vienna and Khaki Manzil in Bandra and Pali Hill. These are views of Mount Mary quite early, before any construction on the Sea Link had also started. Joggers Park, Carter Road, Otters Club. And in Bandra itself, you can see the density of construction is enormous. St. Stanislaus School. Okay, at 1 hour, so I won't take more than another 5 minutes. And here you can see this is what should be the Mithi River, but again, you've got all the mangrove swamps and construction of Bandra Kurla complex. And I think this is Bandra East, which has now been developed, and the walkways which go from Bandra station there. I don't know this area too well, but yeah, this is all BKC and its modern construction. And what we saw in the picture was actually part of the Mithi River. Here, this is the airport, and you can see the traffic on the road on the Western Express Highway and the western suburbs. What's interesting is that most of the western suburbs are actually flat. There are hardly any hills, unlike Malabar Hill, Khambala Hill, and Worli Hill, etc. This part of the city of Salsette is, again, as you see it, completely flat. Here's the road, the Western Express Highway, which snakes through and goes north. You can see over here in the distance is the airport at Santa Cruz, and these are the railway lines. And between them are construction and shanty towns. But this is what it was like. If you were to see that 100 years ago, it says the town of Santa Cruz, Salsette, as seen from Pali Hill. Let's go back. That's what it is now, and that's what it was like then. Big change. And here we've come to Powai Lake, where you have IIT and the Hiranandani complex. I remember going for picnics as a child there and being worried because we were told there were lots of alligators there. That's the Renaissance Hotel over there. And I think, again, it's IIT on the right. And here you can see, I'm sorry, I can't get my pointer to work, but you can see the pipes which bring the main water supply of the city from Powai Lake into the city, running behind the Renaissance Hotel. Again, the construction in Powai of the Hiranandani complex. Here we've come to Juhu. So this is Juhu Airport. It's very close to Santa Cruz. And I think we've had 2 incidents where people have landed their planes at Juhu Airport thinking they were Santa Cruz. And you can see the whole beach going all the way across with the hotels and structures. And over here is the Versova Creek, which there's no bridge across to take you to Marve or Madh, because there's been an aggressive campaign by the locals to stop the connectivity, because obviously they're very worried that their open part of land will become something like this, which is what Versova and Yari Road are like now. Again, that's Versova just at the end, before the creek where the mangroves are. think we have a couple more slides. Looking down on construction there.
Jehangir, do please take your time. I just got walloped for giving you a time signal, so please take as much time as you want.
It's fine. We'll cover it in questions and answers. And here again, whom I call the owners of Bombay, the coolies in the Versova fishing village with their boats right at the end, Versova Creek and the mangroves over there in their small towns. And that's a picture of what Versova Creek was like. That's the same thing that we saw. Let's go back one. That's now. That's then. And all of these were the bungalows which were referred to as 7 bungalows and 4 bungalows, etc. I was very amused in a book written by Zarir Masani, in which he refers to his grandfather, R.P. Masani, who was a very prominent citizen of Bombay, possibly even the mayor, saying that he packed up and left Colaba and moved to Versova because it was too noisy in Colaba and he had to come and stay somewhere where there was quiet. And we are talking about sometime in 1910. His son, Minu Masani, used to swim across the Versova Creek, and many people used to do that as exercise in those days. Here again, you can see what Versova was like alongside the creek with these bungalows. I think there's only one of the original bungalows which is left, which belongs to a heritage architect's family. I can't get it to. Yeah, we go back one. So there you are. So the fact that there's no bridge over here has really saved this part of the city, because there's no question about the fact that there have been the march of this relentless construction across. It wasn't for the fact that to go from here to here takes you roughly about an hour by car. And you can see again, that's the Versova Creek, and see how undeveloped this part of the city is because of the lack of the connectivity and the bridges. And here you can see Gorai with the Vipassana temple over there. This is all Malad, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure which creek. This is the one which connects from Marve to Manori. This is the one which connects from Versova to Madh and Marve, and this here would be INS Hamla. This would connect to Manori. This is Manori. Again, looking back on it, this bit would be Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Again, one green open lung of the city. Versova Creek over here, not much construction on this side. And then here, we have the Gorai Pagoda. No, unfortunately, I want to show you that roughly somewhere here is the division where you get Basin on the other side. But this basically just shows you how the suburbs are extending relentlessly northwards. This whole area, inwards from Gorai would be Bhayandar, Mira Bhayandar, Borivali, that sort of area, all on this side of the national park. And on the other side of the national park are actually the eastern suburbs. I'll end with a few more pleasing images of the city, which I've taken on my current project of doing these night pictures, so you can enjoy them. They're much more serene and soothing than the cataclysmic chaos of construction and cement that you see otherwise. Yeah, this is, where are we? That's the Four Seasons. And looking down onto the racecourse and Vivaria and the Imperial. That's our sea link. That I think is the Mahim Bay. That's looking down from Kanchenjunga onto Kem's Corner, Hughes Road. This is the road coming down from Hanging Gardens, Babulnath Temple, the Oberoi Hotel, and some match going on at the Wankhede Stadium. Bombay looks normal in this picture. No sight of any pandemic or restrictions. Here's Marine Drive, and that again is the sea. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll come out of this mode, stop sharing, and over to you, Farooq.
Super, Jehangir. It was fantastic. The comments are fast and furious, if I can say. Let's look at the questions, Jehangir, and I'm going to start off with a very predictable question. Vimal wanted to know what got you interested in aerial photography.
It was very fortuitous. about 20, 25 years ago, one of my patients was the government helicopter pilot. And he told me, he said, would you like to come with me? I have to do a test flight to check if the helicopter has come back from service and is working. So, of course, I was very nervous. But I went and I took my camera and I had only one roll of film. And I took 36 pictures, but each one of them was a jewel. But then I showed them to people like Charles Correa and Raghuveer Singh, and they were completely fascinated because nobody had really seen Bombay from the air before. There'd been no recent aerial pictures. And so I made sure that my patient remained a little sick. So he kept coming back to me so that I could keep going back with him in the helicopter again and again. So whenever I had the opportunity, I kept doing that. Thank you.
So related to the helicopter, there's another question. Are all your pictures taken from helicopters?
No, a lot of them are taken from high-rise buildings.
And a related question, do you think drones will change the whole perspective of aerial photography?
Absolutely. I mean, I see some of the pictures which have been taken from drones and I gasp. They are absolutely stunning. And drone photographers who know how to exploit the capacity of drone, in fact, they're called drone pilots now, more than drone photographers, can create absolutely amazing views, not only in terms of exploiting the understanding of the architectural heritage of the city, but bringing out the beauty of the city as well. There are some fantastic drone tours of different cities in the world. I sometimes see them on YouTube, and I saw one of Rome now, where it starts off with the drone shot looking through the hole in the Pantheon, and you're looking on this flooring, and you know what it is, and he just keeps pulling up, and up, until suddenly the whole thing just comes out and unfolds in front of you. Amazing.
Somebody says that you should think about photographing Mumbai from the sea now.
It's interesting, but you know, the coastline from that's a good point, because we rarely see Mumbai externally. I mean, for example, how often can you actually take a boat from Nariman Point to Versova and look at the whole coastline of Bombay from the sea? It's not possible because the sea is rocky, etc. It's a good thought. It would be nice to actually see it from the sea, but probably much better done by drone than by from a boat.
Speaking of photographing, Isa wants to know, he says he has a very basic question. Are we allowed to click by DSLR from commercial flights?
Yes, you can look up the DGCA guidelines. So long as it's not from a defense airport, you're allowed to take pictures freely.
Okay, question from Vinayak. How much of your inspiration is from Hassler, and could you throw some light on him and the Bombay Flying Club if you have that information?
I don't, but I know that there are 3 sets of aerials. Sharda Dwivedi used to have them. One was the ones from which Hassler had taken from the 1930s, which I've used over here. Then she had a full set of aerials taken by a gentleman who used to fly a lot called Kirloskar, who took them in the 1950s. And then the next lot was really mine from the 1990s. So I don't know where they are, but they actually need to be, the whole lot needs to be archived and put together in some kind of resource, which people can actually access online quite freely for their reference.
So there's a question from Bharat. Do you plan to shoot the coastal road under construction?
Oh, it's terrible. It's going on not even 100 meters from my house. It's noisy and messy, and it's under construction. I think when it's done, and if it's done well, it may actually be quite nice. But right now is not the time.
A comment was that some of the older photographs and the newer photographs, how well they merged with each other. You could see the then and now. That's been a recurring kind of comment. A question from somebody who probably lives there. Do you plan to shoot the suburbs as well?
I've been criticized a lot for not putting too much of the suburbs in my book. That's for 2 reasons. One is that basically I don't have the opportunity to go across the suburbs as much. And the suburbs don't have as many of the heritage buildings as you have in South Bombay. VT, Prince of Wales Museum, GPO, blah, 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 the colonial bits and the history all is actually in South Bombay. And there's not too much of the ups and downs there. But it would be nice to take some pictures of Sanjay Gandhi National Park and Canary Caves, etc. on the air. Unfortunately, I just haven't had the opportunity to do that.
From your point of view, Jehangir, what do you recommend to somebody who wants to understand the history of Bombay and the development of suburbs? Unfair question, perhaps, but
No, it's interesting. Uh, it's difficult to say because most of the suburbs have really developed from the 1930s and 40s. And the development of the suburbs is absolutely a function of the railway lines which are laid down. And many of these villages of Vile Parla and Borivali and Bandra were advertised as places to have what they call dormitory towns. You lived there, spent the night there, and then you came into work and you went back there again.
Yeah.
So I think the development of the suburbs is largely from that point of view. The certainly Bandra, Bassein have a lot of historical connection to the Portuguese, the Jesuits, etc., and the little bits that you can find which are interesting over there. But other than that, I think it's mainly commercial and residential development which have come up over there.
Maddie wants to know which camera you use to click.
I am not very good. I think most of these were taken with a Nikon film camera initially on 35mm slide film. I remember always being absolutely nervous until the transparencies were back in my hand as to whether they'd come properly or not. And many of them were taken with 35mm Nikon DSLR, the later ones.
Mohit says that your book is a 2005 edition, which he finds on Amazon. Is there anything more recent?
No, the last one, the 2018 one is the one to get. If someone pings me, I'll get it across to them or tell them where to get it.
Right. Sudeshna Gua, who's going to be our next speaker, wants to know, is there an archive of aerial photographs of Bombay?
No, there should be. And I think, people like UDRI and Khaki and the others should actually write to people to contribute and create that resource so that urban researchers can actually just click and see what things were like and get a better idea of what's happening. The municipal corporation actually has a fantastic collection of old photographs of Bombay, but they've all now become property of the Bhaudaji Lad Museum, which was essentially a museum for the history of Bombay for a long time. And the Bhaudaji Lad Museum is not very easy to get them out of. So, there's sort of no reproduction charges and this, that, and the other. So I think all the images of Bombay, historical, current, aerial, etc., need to be digitized and just put into the public domain. Hello?
I think I was away for a bit. One of our colleagues who works in Air India wants to know, how many flights did you have to take?
I can't remember. I think maybe about 5 or 6. 6.
Okay.
Not many. I'm not fond of going up in a helicopter. I'm quite nervous. They're not very stable things, and they shake a lot. And it's not something I look forward to.
Sherry Marker question: do you have any photographs of Nalla Sopara, one of India's oldest forts?
No, in fact, I've been wanting to go because there's an old Buddhist stupa, a collapsed Buddhist stupa, which may be probably the oldest built structure in the Bombay vicinity. So I'm very keen to actually go there when the pandemic's over, but no, I have no pictures of that area.
So while we know about Hassler, the question from Raghu is that, did people shoot from hot air balloons also before Hassler and other kinds of aircraft?
No, I don't think it was possible, because in the old days, the cameras that they had very poor sensitivity on the glass film planes, and therefore you had to expose the film for minutes before you actually got an image. So it wouldn't have been possible to take any kind of decent picture from a balloon, because it would be impossible for it to be stationary. But the first descriptions of Bombay from the air, the first aerial descriptions of Bombay are from balloons, which were big events in Bombay in the 1860s, and used to take off from what was then the Victoria Gardens. And people had to pay a lot to get a ticket. The governor would come, there'd be a band, etc. And this brave gentleman would jump into the balloon and go up in the air, and I think on a couple of times would come crashing down and die. One of them went off and disappeared over the sea and was recovered by a boat and brought back to Bombay 2 or 3 days later. So ballooning was not a very comfortable sport in those days.
I must read out this compliment. He said he's a patient and he doesn't mind coming back again and again to you. His surname is Keswani, if that rings a bell.
Okay. Well,
and Deepak is asking, I think it's only half tongue in cheek. Do you need an intern?
No, I'm not doing this. I've stopped really. I think with drone photography, the kind of aerial photography that I did for 25 years is now completely dated. And I'm much more interested now in spotting structures in the city of Bombay, which I think are interesting, old, and may disappear. So for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been spending a lot of time on my scooter with my phone camera, zipping around the little gullies of Mandwi, Dongri, Umar Khadi, Nal Bazaar, CP Tank, stopping and looking at all the buildings, spotting stained glass, some inscriptions, something about the thing, etc., and trying to relate them to what the roads were like in the old days, how they were laid out, and what structures these could have been in the old times. So that's been my fascination of late.
And what gems have you discovered on these forays?
Oh, there's a lot, there's a hell of a lot. But unfortunately, a lot of it has changed. The pity about Bombay is that it was such a charming and beautiful city, and it's been replaced with just ugliness. Most of the structures which have come up are just terrible. They're like sort of boxes with these grills and cages, etc. And to a large extent, Bombay is a victim of rent control. I remember many years ago, the mayor of Hanoi came to Bombay and said, what the American bombs didn't do to our city, we did with rent control. All the buildings, the old buildings crumbled and fell down, etc. And so many of the old buildings, which are charming with lovely carved stonework and lovely capitals, etc., are just disappearing because of the fact that there's no money for landlords to support it, and everybody has a vested interest in it falling down and getting demolished and rebuilt, etc. And nothing nice is coming up in that place.
You said you aren't doing it, but is anyone else documenting the eastern seaboard and the development that's going to happen over there soon? Bhargavi says that we may lose out on what it looks like 10, 15 years hence with all that development.
That's true. I think it's the job of some drone photographers, but good luck to them, because it's Mazgaon Dock, Navy, and dockyards, etc. So the people in this country are extremely sensitive about anything which they feel is into inverted commas defense related, even though you could probably see it perfectly well on a satellite map. I remember when I first applied for permission to publish aerial pictures in my book, I took them across to the Navy and said that, look, I'm planning to publish these. Do you have any objections? If you do, please tell me now and I won't print them. And they said, yeah, please don't show this and don't show that and don't show this, etc. Then the next time I went and met them, they said, show whatever you want because it's all available on Google Maps. So, the technology defeats the sort of perception of security in many of these instances. So I have a feeling that, you will not get permission to shoot these areas, despite the fact that they may be available on Google Maps.
Okay. So in addition to people offering themselves to intern themselves with you, somebody wants to be a helper or carrier.
Sure. Just message me. Next time I go on a walk or a spin through the innards of the city, we can go together.
Have you come across Obelisk Road? That's a question from Vinayak Talwar. In your searches in Dongri, Nal Bazaar, etc.
Yeah, I think it's the road which is somewhere, Vinayak, I think it's somewhere near Nagpada. It's one of the roads which connects from Nagpada to on Duncan Road, or connects out to what was then Muhammad Ali Road. The main road at that time was Duncan Road, which came to Nagpada, Clare Road and onwards. The whole of Muhammad Ali Road was laid down along with Princess Street after the 1896 plague epidemic by the City Improvement Trust in order to allow light and fresh air into the native quarters. So they wanted to open it up. So they created these two big arterial thoroughfares. But I think on a map, I've seen something about Obelisk Road in that area.
We've got somebody in the audience who said that that's possibly today's Dimtimkar Road.
Dimtimkar Road is mainly the new name for Belassus Road.
Okay. Lots of people agreeing with you about the Rent Control Act being the downfall of our city in terms of the preserving the heritage. So do we know why Obelisk Road was so called?
No, I have no idea. I'm trying to think where it is. Vinayak, would it be in that Shepherd's book on the place names of Bombay at all? I don't think it's there.
So no, it's not there, Jehangir. So Obelisk Road actually refers to the stretch which connects, which is today a part of Grant Road, in fact.
Right.
So it's not Dimtimkar Road. It's a part.
It's the one
which
parallel to that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. But
Okay.
mention as to which obelisk is being spoken about.
No, but there's on Grant Road also there are those Northcote Gardens.
Right. The
Right, which were built by Northcote after his visit or something or the other. I'm trying to think where one would be able to get a lead on that. Let me think. If I can find anything, I'll certainly ping you on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. So that does it, Jehangir. Thanks a lot. Fantastic. We got to know then and now. We got to such a sociological, ecological kind of perspective into our city. And as like lots and lots of people have said, it was fantastic. And
thanks very much. Thank you all for your patience and your time. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jehangir.